welcome to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, joined as always by my lovely,
traveling
co-host Jack. Yes, you might notice Jack is not in his normal spot. He has decided to abandon hometown of Juneau and go visit some family. So he is recording from outside his normal domicile. But we're still here. We're still going to record the podcast. His audio at times could be funky, but we think it's going to be all right. We think it's going to be good.
We trust in Discord.
Hello and welcome to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, joined by Jack, who is back in his actual house, unlike the clip that was just shown where I absolutely jinxed it and we had very terrible audio for the entire thing.
This is our mea culpa, you know?
Yeah. This is
sometimes things happen.
We, there was maybe a recording of my audio onto Jack's audio and also my audio separately being recorded to my audio. So I was just so loud and blown out. And it was not good. And Jack's audio was just recorded the once, and so it was not as loud. It was, maybe live, laugh, learn.
There's a lot of hijinks that go on to audio and video production, and Eric tried his best to get around the fact that I was up staying with my brother. We planned on recording something. I tried a bunch of things. I thought I could get away with just my tablet up there rather than bringing up all my recording stuff. And then it was a whole thing.
And I think if that had been the only thing, it still would have been fine.
Right.
And I think if I recorded the audio poorly, but your audio was like with your full setup, we might have been able to make it work. Mm-hmm. But it's a no. It's a no.
Yep.
So we're back. And everything's A-okay here. We definitely didn't jinx it. We definitely did jinx it. Oh no, now I feel like I'm jinxing this one.
I think you got to stop saying jinx. I think you're just going to have to move on, trust in the cosmos. Eric, what did we talk about last week where we didn't actually publish a podcast and are going to run through again? Like, what are we talking about here? What do we do on this podcast?
We are chatting about how games exude theme. So this is a little bit of an expansion of a previous recording before Jack had his lovely conversation with 3 Minute Games. We were chatting about the best IP-based games and how those games exude theme. Mm-hmm. And now we are at the point where we would like to chat about kind of like the broader concept of so first of all, what is a thematic game and how does a game tell you its story? Like, how does a game exude that theme in the ways that different board games are able to, and games that are particularly good at it, and some games that we feel are particularly bad at it?
Right. And I saw when we asked this question, some people trying to quibble a bit with the word exude. And I've used interchangeably here express theme. But I did think about it a little bit more because exude is usually radiation or, like oozing or something escaping. And, like expressing theme to me would be the ways in which a game directly conveys theme. And so, that is intentional. It is something that is manufactured, which games are manufactured products. But I think Exude, as you had put it up on the channel, is more the ephemeral, just the whole way in which you can have yourself thematically captured to feel that resonance when playing a game. And there's a bunch of different ways that can happen. So we're going to get into expressing theme, exuding theme, radiating theme. I don't know, a bunch of different theme. We got some thoughts. We had some thoughts last week. Maybe we have different thoughts this week, but you didn't get to hear last week, so you won't know what's original or not.
Exactly.
In the meantime, you've been playing any games, Eric? You've been pretty busy. You're getting ready for coming up to Juno, but what's shaking?
Coming up to Juno soon, so less time for gaming as we just kind of get some things squared away for the travel. But I did get, I got to show some of my friends who are very much not board game enthusiasts, Things and Rings.
Okay,
which they loved by the end of. That was like by. I've played Things and Rings a handful of times. We've talked about it on the channel before. That was, I would say, by far my most successful. Oh, this is a game that I'm playing for people who aren't like core gamers.
Right.
Very successful. They enjoyed it a lot. And then we also played Hitster, which is a party game. Probably, it's absolutely like a big mass market game.
Sure.
Where you have like different songs and you have to try to place the year it happened. They have like a deck of cards that is a QR code on the back, and you scan it, and it plays the song.
Kind of sounds almost like Timeline. Have you played Timeline before?
No.
So Timeline is kind of interesting in that it's defined information. Like you have a set of cards, and you start by playing something, and then someone else has to play a card in association with that in the correct slot in the timeline. And so it might be like Invention of the Bicycle or The Big Bang, and those two are really easy to assemble, but eventually it gets more and more complex as you go, because you might be like, well, steam engine versus cotton gin versus the American Civil Rights Movement, of course, for some people this is going to be really easy depending on your area of expertise. There's a bunch of different themes for Timeline, and it's very approachable and enjoyable for anyone. You don't have to feel like you're good at board games. It's just kind of like a trivia game, but it's also relying on some sort of nuanced deduction skills. You can reason, does this wedge in here? Does this wedge in here? It's not so much a game, like in the end it almost becomes a cooperative endeavor, because everyone's just like, oh, let's try to figure this out together. And once you've played it a couple times, you pretty much know everything, so you got to find a new audience to play it with. But I have an appreciation for that kind of stuff. And Things and Rings, what's cool about that is it brings the subjective into it, right? It has a lot of room for you to, kind of associate certain meanings together when there's a lot of subjectivity, and that creates the discussion. And I think that is what's going to make or break that game for a lot of people. Some people want literal, finite things. Some people are cool with like, well, technically, maybe, kind of, in a way, this fits into this category.
Yeah, I think that was they enjoyed that there was a bit of subjectivity where they were like, you know what? Do you consider hoes to be typically found outside? Probably. Probably. Yeah, we're going to say yes. We're going to say yes on this one. So I think they enjoyed the like slight flexibility and the fact that as the like knower, you kind of have a little bit of impetus in the game.
This just occurred to me, but one of the things about Things and Rings that is very distinctive and I think attractive to a casual audience is you're trying to put into these Venn diagrams, these cards, which are just concepts, into categories, trying to understand what the relationship of these cards are. But the visuals are clearly Dr. Seuss. It is absolutely 100%. That is the style that it's aping. Now, I find that extremely endearing. On the other hand, recently there was the game Settlers of Navoria, and there was a huge amount of controversy over that because it was an art style that absolutely was copying the style of Kyle Farron from Leader Games. Like, it looked like someone was trying to make a Leader game, but not Kyle Farron. And so, I mean, on one hand, I would say Things and Rings is closer in visual style to Dr. Seuss than Explorers, Settlers, something of Navoria. I actually reviewed the game and I made comment on the similarities. Like, there's a more one-to-one, this is copying this exact style. I guess it's kind of different because Kyle Farron is an active illustrator in this hobby, in this medium, whereas Dr. Seuss is a dead guy who there's been time for his work to breathe, and he wasn't making board games in the first place. But it is interesting that some things strike controversy, some don't, and I'm going to have to parse that out a little bit more in my brain.
Yeah, well, in my mind, I think that it would make sense. I mean, I'm looking at Explorers of Navoria now, and yeah, that's pretty Kyle Farron-esque.
Right.
I think the big difference for me, at least, is, first of all, Dr. Seuss is not board game. Like, it's a different medium entirely. And second of all, Kyle Farron is like an active artist making the product that you are selling.
Totally.
So it feels like you're trying to rip him off versus Things and Rings feels like an homage to Dr. Seuss because he's not like an active artist in the industry you're currently publishing in.
Right. No one is going to accidentally think that
Dr. Seuss
illustrated this game, whereas you could argue that in Explorers in Navoria that the illustrator might capitalize a bit on people mistakenly thinking this is in line with Root or Fort.
If you had not told me Kyle Farron didn't illustrate this, I don't think I would know off rip that this is not Kyle Farron.
Yeah.
I think my assumption would be that this was Kyle Farron.
Yeah. And, it's been dissected aplenty. Yeah. Speaking of Kyle Farron,
new thoughts.
What I've played, I got some Ahoy to the table with the new expansions. I should have a review up for that, not this coming week, but the following week. There's 4 new factions. There's like a deck of treasure cards that adds like a new asymmetric power that each that you can have. It's compatible with all the factions. You just draw 2 and pick 1, and it's just a little extra thing that you have for that game, which in some ways I think is a cooler addition than the additional factions. And then an upgrade pack. I think it's all great. Ahoy is a temperamental game, and the expansions kind of don't address that. It gives you more variety, but the game is still always reliant on having exactly one blue faction, exactly one yellow faction, and then at higher player counts, you can have a mix of these other ones. But it's also got a lot of charm and a lot of quirkiness, and I love that it gets into weird board states, so I'm here for it. And, the expansion materials are great. The Leviathan is ridiculously cool as a faction or character. I don't know. You're just one thing. You're a giant sea monster who is playing Tetris across the seas, and it's great. I love it.
We got nothing better to do other than play Tetris.
Yeah, what are you going to do? And then other than that, I am really excited because I have Emerald Echoes, which is the latest Post-Curious game. Fans of this channel know that I've been a huge fan of Rita Orlov's work since The Tale of Ord, which was Post-Curious's first game. And I think this is one of the most exciting new directions that she's taken game design, particularly in that all of the former games that she's published or that she's taken part in, even outside of that, because I reviewed Pandora's Legacy, have relied on digital access to for verification of like clues and entering things to be able to move on to the next level. And this bakes into it a clue system that's in these folders that's revealed as you go, but it's a narrative. It's a text exchange between two people who are also researching it. So you're kind of taking the part of these two people, no matter how many players are playing the game, but you're trying to figure out how to solve this puzzle, and you can use that text exchange to make sure that you're right on the right path. Or if you're able to solve it entirely, then you can just get to the end of that text exchange and verify that you did it correctly. Now, this does take away some of the open-ended nature of these types of games, which is, this is a very linear game. You are going to be playing it in sequential order. You don't just kind of have a bunch of materials and dive into it. So there is a sacrifice in handling things this way. But having the clue system, instead of feel like a concession, that it's like, well, I guess we got to get a clue. It now feels like the game is in on it with you. Like the narrative is tied intimately to the clue system, and it's all in physical form, and it's helping you along. And weaving that all together, I think, makes for a much more natural experience, a much more forgiving experience, and you don't have to rely on it entirely to deal with some of these really challenging puzzles. So I'm having a great time with that one. Emerald Echoes is a sequel to the Emerald Flame. So it's also cool to have like the first, continuation of a storyline that was in one of their other games.
Yeah, I need to. First of all, I would like to play one of Rita's games because she's cool, and I haven't played a puzzle game like hers. Like I've done Escape Room in a Box, but it feels like this is a significant jump up from that I would really like, but I just haven't gotten my hands on one from her.
I think when you're up, maybe I'll get you and get you and Mim a copy of The Light in the Mist, which I think is to me still my favorite of her games. I think it's deeply emotional and a very interesting game that uses tarot cards as the puzzle medium, but a lot of the tarot cards are multi-use, so like it's not immediately apparent that this set of tarot cards goes together, but some of those may also be part of other puzzles. So it feels like you have a ton of information, but as soon as you start seeing certain patterns or things develop, or you have recollection from things that you've done in the past, it all kind of weaves together. It's also probably the most sandboxy of all of her stuff. Like there is no linear working through. You just have that, and you are working through it one step at a time, but in any order you choose. Definitely worth checking out.
With the tarot cards, is that like tied into the theme of the game?
Yes.
Would you say it's like exuding its theme?
I would say it is exuding, radiating, permeating. I mean, it's mist. It's the light in the mist.
It's permeating through.
Yeah.
The light is the theme. The mist is the permeable barrier.
Yes. I guess so.
Must pass to become a thematic game.
Or that light is passing through. I don't know. Suddenly, the speed of light is not real because I've been reading the Memories of Earth Pass trilogy. So let's move on from the light and the mist. Let's talk about theme.
Yeah, so we are going to be talking about theme this week, and Jack here has a few different ways that he sees as like the way that a game can convey theme. And I'm in agreement for the most part. I think there is like a slight wording issue that we went over last time. We're gonna stick with no. We're sticking with it. No. Don't delete that. I see you on the Google Docs. No. Leave that where it is.
Okay. I was like, oh man, I didn't change that. I probably should have. Okay. Then I'll go through these here. So, what I'm hoping we can do is just kind of talk about different ways that designers can, or publishers, or anyone who's involved in a game, can convey theme that they're trying to display, or that we receive it as the audience that's playing a game. And broadly speaking, non-exhaustive, I broke it down into there's like visuals, so that's illustrations, that's artwork, that could potentially even be the components. Tone, this is more, like style than just the illustrations itself. It could be the way that the game describes itself in a rule book, all kinds of things. The tone of the experience overall. Mm-hmm. There's a lore, which is, like some games, most games, in fact, will just straight up have a blurb. This is what's happening in this game, right? But that can be great or small. Some games, especially, like a lot of campaign type games, will have a substantial amount of lore. But almost every game will have some sort of, this is what's happening. Then I have resonant mechanisms. So, like when you do something in a game and you recognize that this is a metaphor for something that's happening. This is an abstraction, but when I do this, I'm kind of understanding that this is representative of some other concept. So that's thematic resonance that's coming through in actually performing the actions of the game. And then logical reality. This is the big one here. What did we end up settling on for logical reality? What was this? Did I have an explanation that was satisfactory to you, Eric?
I think logical reality, the way that we discussed it was that it is, how does the world of the game, like, it makes sense that this happens because it is thematic. Like,
yeah. So I think a good example, you got Sky Team on your shelf there.
Yeah.
In Sky Team, you're in a plane. Everyone understands that planes are a thing, and if they are breaking, then they're going to be going down. And so the descent of the plane is the altitude that's happening is giving you the sense of this impending conclusion of the game. So there's something that the game doesn't even really need to tell you, that you as a layman still have a baseline understanding of, and it is relying on that baseline understanding to give you a sense of dread, conclusion, logic. Same thing with fundamental concepts. People understand gravity, or when I do this, this other thing happens. I think logical reality is just the relying on what a layman would understand to be the logical conclusion of something happening, and then using that to springboard other thematic concepts off of.
Yeah, like things that a person who has never played this game before will ask, wait, I need to make the plane land level though, right? Like without having any mechanical reasoning behind it, it naturally makes sense that this would be the thing that happens.
Yeah,
Either because of the real world or because of the world of the game.
Right, and that sense of fidelity, and maybe that's what it is. I think it is slightly different than just having resonant mechanisms. Resonant mechanisms, I think, are the metaphor where you're doing something and you realize that this is supposed to be representative of a certain action, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can feel this coming through. Whereas logical reality is that something happens in the game, and that is the logical conclusion. You would expect that because you've already bought into the magical circle that is this game, and that thing happened, and then you were like, oh, hell yeah. That makes so much sense, of course. I think if we are wanting to go ahead and start dissecting some of these, another great example of this might be Forbidden Island, where the water is continuing to rise, and the moment you see that the tiles that have flipped over to their flooding side, if you don't do anything about them, then they start going away because they're completely inaccessible. They can no longer be shored up. That is such a brilliant moment where I've had tons of new gamers, casual gamers, play that game and go like, oh, I get it. That suddenly underscores the pressure that you have, the desperation, the sense of excitement that you have a hand in these things happening, and it underscores that the same areas that have already come up are going to come up again and again and again. And that's not necessarily something that you're taking action on. That's just working with someone's understanding of how water works, how a flooding might work, and the mental picture, the sense, the feeling is coming through beautifully, and they understand the game better, even if they don't fully have a grasp on all the mechanics or the underpinnings that are making this happen.
Yeah, totally. And I think that there are a ton of games that can do that well. I think to kind of get started on the bigger discussion, I think we should start with visuals, just because I feel like that's the easiest way for a game to exude its theme. I mean, I think that the board and the components that you're interacting with are all like the easiest way to go, hey, this is the theme. We're going to be a bit in your face about it because this is like important or something.
Right. And, you know, like I've heard before that, like on a book, the cover to a book is the first tonal promise that you're going to make to the reader. It's essentially an advertisement for the book. You don't necessarily have to have it as literal. You are making a tonal promise on, if you read this book, this is what's going to be the result of it. Now, you could dissect that with all kinds of book covers and whatnot, but board game covers are essentially trying to do the same thing. And there are a lot of games where the illustration on the box is a different artist than the illustrations within, or the most prominent, distinct illustration is going to be the box art, whereas the rest of the illustrations in the game are not nearly as luxurious. But it is making a tonal promise, and that is the entry point for a lot of people of like, what is the setting? What am I going to be doing? What type of game is this? You know, like,
yeah. Like Wingspan's got the
got
scissor-tailed
Gloria.
flycatcher.
Yes,
Gloria?
yes, Gloria, the scissor-tailed flycatcher.
It also has other birds on the outsides of it, but like it's promising you, hey, this is a game about birds, and they are going to be beautifully illustrated. That's like
beautifully illustrated.
The big takeaway that you can get from the box. You kind of don't get any idea of how like how difficult this game is going to be to learn, or like what are the primary mechanics in this game. It is just, this is a game about birds that are beautifully illustrated. And you have the thing on the back, and games also, the box itself gives you it gives you an idea of how difficult a game is going to be, or like how crunchy a game is going to be. Not always, but
right.
Like, I'm not going to expect the same amount of difficulty from like Witchcraft as I am from Spirit Island.
Right. Well, I mean, and like art can go a long way, and art style can go a long way to convey that. I think, like Spirit Island is a great example of, I'm not sure that from the box art itself what you would expect from the game.
Yeah.
And I think actually a lot of the illustrations in the game are really inconsistent. It kind of reminds me of the early days of Magic, where there were a lot of they just needed art assets, and so some of them weren't always going to be bangers, right? And the same thing is true with Spirit Island. The spirits themselves are gorgeous, and those are definitely tonal promises. The first time that you're going through, you're looking at them, and the combination of the name of the spirit as well as the spirit themselves is already giving you so much to kind of imagine what each of these spirits do. And almost always, one of the great successes of Spirit Island's thematic majesty, because I think it's one of the most thematic games that I've played, is that almost always what you imagine that spirit does is kind of being done, right? If you have some sort of time-shattering spirit that looks like an ethereal black hole nightmare in the sky, and you're like, oh god, what is this thing? And then you look at the cards and you're like, oh, it's exactly what I thought. I am breaking the very essence of time and space.
It's Black Hole Time Guy.
Yeah, Black Hole Time Guy.
Or Big Rock Guy. Very defensive. Big Rock Guy is great for being defensive.
Hungry Ocean. Sweeping in, ebbing out.
Yeah.
But I think that I love when illustrations are played around with, especially a game that I think about a lot when it comes to game maps and game boards is Lords of Waterdeep, which has, to me, one of the best maps of any game. And it got a lot of criticism when it came out as being, themeless or painted on theme. And I think it's because there were a lot of people who were used to like high fantasy not being something integrated with Euro games, whereas I think that it beautifully integrates with the theme and the worker placement mechanics. And a lot of that is that it uses a gorgeous, detailed city map that almost looks like Victorian London. And, that's trying to help convey, you're not the hero. You're not the paladin who's going out and doing these adventures. Oh. You are a, provincial governor. You're, an underhanded, shadow puppeteer in this city. You're,
the quest giver, not the quest doer.
Exactly. You're a tavern owner. You're a politician. And I think the map really does a good job of cementing the distance from what typically would be thought of as, like a Dungeons and Dragons type of game. It very much feels like an artifact of that world, however, is trying to already, just from the time that you lay that out, give you a different perspective. Though, I would say the box art for Lords of Waterdeep very much might give you the impression, if you were doing a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing, and you were like, Lords of Waterdeep, Dungeons and Dragons, you might think that you're the person going out on that quest.
Yeah.
I could see the mistake there.
This is maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably think you're doing quests. Let's look at the back. No, that also kind of looks like you're doing quests. I get gold and double dealing flow freely in the City of Splendors. That's a different game. City of Splendors is an expansion.
You know, now that we're on Lords of Waterdeep and it's on your shelf right now, or in your hands right now, we need a second edition of this game, dog. Like, so much more could be done with this. I don't know.
This is just
Hasbro.
painful how much I know that all of the pieces in here have been completely disarranged now.
But
it would be great if there was a second edition that just had better, like,
storage.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
This would be a game, especially, I'm kind of surprised with. This feels like it would have been a very good slam dunk for when Honor Among Thieves came out.
Mm-hmm.
To, like, re-release with like, some assets from that movie. But I guess there's not really too many quest givers in that movie.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they'll get back around to it sometime. Maybe,
they got things.
Hopefully.
They got other WizKids has things to do.
Yeah. Well, you know, like, I think that would be the smartest thing. Give WizKids Lords of Waterdeep rather than making it a Hasbro in-house production.
Yeah.
Before we move on from visuals, are there any games that you think have outstanding theme that just, like, to you immerses you completely, or games where you think, like, you just a complete rejection of theme, like looking at this game kind of takes me out of this and just reminds me how much it is that I'm playing a game instead of being immersed in it?
I have two games that come to mind for both of these prompts. Treasure Island, I feel like just you put out the game board and it looks like a treasure map.
Mm-hmm.
I think that just visually looks great. The whole point of it is you're scouring this land to try and find treasure. And I think that the board does a pretty good job. I think that the miniatures do a reasonably good job being like, oh, this is your character moving around the map. I think there are parts of it that end up being a little bit underwhelming that do feel very mechanic-y, where it's like
right.
They have like the very big borders of like, you can't put the treasure here, so we're gonna put a red line around there so everybody knows you can't put treasure here. I don't really know a better way for them to have done that. But I think that's a game that I think fits both those criteria, where it is a game that I think of as visually it does really feel like the pirate game that it is, and also it feels like it gave away a little bit for the mechanics. And the other one that I think is both is Furnace.
Yeah.
That game being like you are playing as a capitalist, and I feel like it could have very easily have been a very boring Euro that just is like, you do this thing to get oil. And it kind of is. I love it. But the artwork, I feel like, does a pretty good job just like showing like, oh, you're horribly polluting the world making this oil. Like, it really leans into you are a like turn of the century capitalist trying to pollute the world as much as possible in a way that visually it isn't like an appealing thing to look at, but it's not trying to be. Like, it definitely doesn't pop off the table. Like, when I'm if I see somebody playing it, I'm not going to be like, ooh, what's that game? I'm going to be like, oh, that's beige and boring.
But in a way that's thematic. You know, Terraforming Mars is horrible in that it looks like Disco Thanksgiving. It does not capitalize on its edutainment type of shtick. You know, like originally when I was playing it, I was like, are they going for like this, you know, 1995 edutainment, early Mac software, something that would be in a school type of look.
Yeah.
But they don't even lean into that. And so it doesn't have a cohesive theme. The components that you have are kind of ugly. The illustrations are ugly. It doesn't feel very fitting to have all of these doctored photographs that are in it. Like it's using a lot of stock imagery, but it feels like it's also then been photoshopped to kind of be in space or whatever.
Yeah.
But and the UI, oh god, the UI just
Yeah,
looks terrible.
it's
The
not
UI
great.
is horrible, and none of it feels cohesive. And so, like, when I'm playing that game, I'm already kind of disappointed in the game itself, and I'm thinking about how I'm disappointed in the game, and its success is only dependent on just how revolutionary and great Terraforming Mars is as a game, that it overcame all of these setbacks. But, from the moment where I originally played it, going back to my original written review of Terraforming Mars way back in the day, something that you were talking about with Furnace really made me think about this. Terraforming Mars, to me, it thematically is like a depressing concept, but it doesn't have the gall to interact with it in any meaningful way. You are capitalists, like late stage capitalists who are undertaking the most. Oh, I have a barking dog out there. Who are undertaking the grandest endeavor of humanity to terraform an entire other planet so that you can have habitable ecosystem for humanity. And yet you're doing it so you can get profit.
To make profit.
And the game fails to engage in that in any meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. It really feels like a missed opportunity for them to have not... Like, they have a card that's like colonizer camp.
Mm-hmm.
You could have leaned in hard into how like wretched this, like, the goal of your company is.
Right, and even if it's trying to not take a position on, profiting off of minerals, off of, is there a philosophical conundrum of having like a Bichon Frise dog on Mars? Exactly. Even if you're trying to distance yourself from taking any position on that, it doesn't even ask interesting questions about the economics of doing this, of, what medicine would look like for a society, what a better government structure would look like. It just seems like an extrapolation of late stage capitalism and trying to sell consumers on something, and yet it doesn't even ask interesting questions about that either. Like, it doesn't lean into that as almost like a parody of itself. It offers no room for something interesting. Anyway, I just went on a big tirade about that. A great theme, I think, that bridges us into the next one, which is components, but visuals is done really well, is Pax Pamir by Whirligig Games. Mm-hmm. I think more than their other games, Pax Pamir just does a fabulous job of having an art style in all of these illustrations that feels period appropriate to what it's trying to depict, feels very well researched, and feels, like tonally evocative. Like it makes you curious about the setting. It makes you curious about the point in time. They're very superbly done, and it's very cohesive throughout the entire thing. And then that is underscored by just the components in general. Cloth map, Okay, well, clearly they're trying to convey, something about, that gives it a gravitas or looks like it's from another time period. Totemic clay standees that represent your soldiers. They're not plastic dudes. You have just like a flat block that is like, boom, this is either a road if it's on its side, or if it's standing tall, it's a soldier. It does such a good job at making you feel part of this period in history that the game is trying to wrestle with, which is the great game in Afghanistan and the Middle East, and kind of the meddling that's happening by Russia and Britain, and how the people from the area are also trying to wrestle with those forces to potentially either come out on top, exploit it, or just survive it.
Yeah, and I think that I agree that the components being these big totemic pieces, as you have so eloquently said, I think is very helpful in abstracting the fact about, like, the game is the soft and hard power that is being put into this not battlefield. That's not the right word. This
there
political theater that is being played,
right?
And I think
it almost looks like the like when you'd watch an old war movie and you'd see someone like push some pieces or something. It does make it feel like you are strategists rather than directly controlling the troops or something.
Exactly, and I think that's it. It just fits so well with what that game is. And I think components, that's kind of like our next subtopic here in visuals, but components just can go so far in helping you with the helping everybody feel involved and engaged in the theme.
They give a tangibility,
Yeah, they give a tangibility. We have a whole podcast about topics, which I will link to in one of the corners of the screen once I figure out how to do that on YouTube. I know that there's a way to do it. I've done it before. I always forget how to do it because I do it so infrequently.
Cards, dog. It's all in the cards.
It's all in the cards. But we'll have that podcast come out or pop up here. But we've talked about components so much in that they are the thing that you interact with. Like, they are the most immediate object you are interacting with to play this game, whatever that game is. And there's a lot of things that are important in conveying the theme that I think components can do a great job with. Like, you just mentioned Spirit Island. All of the player pieces being made out of wood or something natural, and all of the invader and blight pieces being made out of plastic is that is such a subtle but just perfect way to exude the theme of you are the natural world fighting back against invaders. And there's a lot of different components that we've talked about and discussed in that podcast and others that do a great job, but it doesn't feel right to mention visuals without also talking about the components, since they're just such a big part of it.
Right. Yeah. I think another good example of this would be in Ironwood, which recently came out. And that has two factions, and both of the factions are the same peoples, just split up culturally. And one of the factions, all of their components are heavy metal components. And then the other faction is all wood components. And that works thematically, but it also, subtly, intrinsically, start separating you out from your opponent. not only does it give you a good read on the table, but it gives you this feeling of the nimble flexibility of the woodland characters as opposed to the stout and entrenched defensiveness of the metallic characters. That's underscored by even the weight of holding these different pieces, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, and I think I still haven't played Ironwood, but I think that is a amazing way to demonstrate, like, first of all, just right off the bat, which pieces are mine, which pieces are yours. Metal, mine, wood, yours. It without having to, like, really think about it. And I think that that's one of the things that components can do best in terms of exuding the theme, which is helping you recognize things without thinking about it.
Right. And this kind of weaves into tone, which really is the bigger next topic. You know, like, tone can be, you know, the art style, but it can also be expressed in other things. And, like, that to me is, you know, a tonal element. It's giving you a certain feeling just by manipulating the components, just by looking at it. There's a certain identity, a difference. But tone can be so much, and is probably the most abstract or nebulous of all of these. I think probably
More nebulous than logical reality?
I think so. Yeah, I think logical reality. There's a nugget in there that's hard to target, but it's like the old, you know, I know it when I see it type of thing. Yeah. Whereas tone is nebulous in that everything in theory is conveying tone one way or another, right? But, you know, when I talk about tone really coming out in a game, I'm thinking about, say, Mysterium. You know, like, there are a lot of mechanics in Mysterium that are really gamey. There are certain aspects that may contradict the theme even, but just the essence, the art style, the way cards look, the certain components that you're given, and the conceit of the game itself. You know, that one player is a ghost, and they are trying to communicate things about their murder to the other players by way of dreams, and then getting them to do something. Tonally, all works together, and while you can have a completely silly time playing Mysterium, because you got rounds to burn, you still, nonetheless, I think everyone kind of engages in it at like a thematic level. Like, they feel that this is trying to be like a ghost story that we are taking part in.
Yeah, and all of the artwork and the components, the rulebook, all of it feels like it is a tonally consistent, like, it's taking the ghost aspect of it very seriously. It's not playing really anything for laughs. Like, it is very much we are all playing as oracles. Right. And it does that really well in a way that I think, it's just, I think the fact that it's consistent, it comes through in everything it's doing. It works really well. Mysterium's a great game because I think Mysterium Park does the exact, like, it's the same thing. It is still tonally consistent, and you can tell that Mysterium Park is a continuation of that tone. Right. Like, and
it's neither here nor there, but I don't see Mysterium Park discussed much. People should get it. If you like Mysterium Park is just a more consolidated version. I think it's a better version. You should get it. You should check it out. I agree.
Yeah. We're in agreement here. We're in agreement here. But I think that tone is one of the reasons, not to continue dunking on it, but Terraforming Mars, the tone is just kind of all over the place, which is the reason why the art style doesn't work. Like, the visuals don't work because the tone, it doesn't have like it doesn't feel like it has a very considered tone. This is what we're going with. It's not quite edutainment. It doesn't lean into like we're going to be silly capitalists, but we're going to take it seriously, like Furnace does, where it's like Furnace is, you are playing as capitalists. It acknowledges that. It leans into it. It's not playing it necessarily for laughs, but it is like tonally consistent, which I think is one of the reasons why Terraforming Mars doesn't work very well.
Terraforming Mars would have been served better if it had more consistently leaned into a tone, even if it weren't for laughs. For example, Helldivers, the recent video game, or like a great comparison to that would be Starship Troopers, or the Fallout series of video games. Now, those are all subversive, satirical works, but when Terraforming Mars has an expansion that's like Venus Next, to me, that's almost like the unstoppable hunger for humanity to consume all things in its solar system. So there is a satirical element, but I'm not sure that the makers, that Frixelius, really saw any degree of humor in that. And had there been that kind of like, we're bringing managed democracy to the rest of the galaxy that Helldivers has, or, for capitalism, any man would give his only begotten son to the stars, or, something like that.
And we would. Goodbye, Syrian. Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really could have had something more cohesive there. And it wouldn't even have to be, satirical. I think Arc Nova is a great example of a similar type of game that has a very consistent theme, consistent tone. It does play with some of the elements of conservation versus profit. Ultimately, those are two arms that need to work in concert. But are you putting all of your eggs in one basket versus the other, and the realization that you need to generate funds to be able to participate in conservation efforts, and the photographs that are used. I said that word kind of weird. Photographs. The photographs. Yes. I think even those look a lot more consistent. Like, the UI is presented in a way, the how animals are portrayed, how the helpers are portrayed, tonally way more like it knows what it's going for, and it's using all of its thematic strings that it can pull to work in concert with that overall theme.
Yeah, and I think Arc Nova is a game that I have noted here of it does a really great job in telling its story. Like, it does a good job in telling the story of your Exude that needs to do conservation. Like, you have to.
That needs to get some freaking pandas in it.
Also needs to get some pandas in it. Dude, you're missing out on your pandas.
In that petting zoo. Well, probably shouldn't have a panda in your petting zoo.
They're probably safe to have in the petting zoo.
Yeah, just give a kid
kind of idiots.
Stick of bamboo.
Yeah.
To hand out some bamboo.
Have everybody dress up as a stick of bamboo. You'll just get climbed on. Dude, I saw the pandas. We just got the pandas back in DC. I saw them. One of them came out. First thing it did, climbed a very large tree, and I'm like, "There's no way it's getting down from that safely." It's like you are in the most. You sprinted from your safe door up a tree. You looked like you were about to fall 3 times. A branch you were standing on broke off, and you had to climb up it.
Yeah.
It at a weird angle. It was fine. It was fine. It did fall like at the end, but it fell just a little bit. Right. I was just like, pandas may be
They're not doing themselves any favors.
They're not doing themselves any favors here.
Yeah.
Put them in petting zoos. I don't know. Maybe that'll make them smarter.
All right.
Lore. I think lore does kind of go hand in hand with tone, because I think lore gives you the base to work with for your tone. And I think, one, it helps you, your lore, and like having that be very figured out and very present to the audience, especially if it's a already existing IP, helps inform the tone. Like, I wouldn't expect a Dune game to be like the subversive Fallout series, like type shtick where you're like, well, we got conquered again here on Arrakis. Such is life. I'm not expecting that to be like the theme of the game or the tone of the game. And it's different with games that have like very well established lore, like Dune. Any Dune game, I think, has a pretty clear idea of what you're going to be doing.
I think that the lore has the ability to open up the door to whatever weird situation that your game finds itself in. Speaking of pandas, Takenoko is a great example of a game where, like, if someone was like, okay, what are we doing in this game? And it's like, well, there's a panda and we're growing bamboo, and the panda has to eat the bamboo and we get points for doing it. That doesn't really have any basis in reality, where someone's like, okay, so am I the panda? Like, what's happening here? The theme does kind of fall apart if you pull on it too much, but to try and help with this, because I imagine Antoine Bauza, when he was making the game, was like, well, I want a game where you're growing bamboo and it looks really cool. The rule book is a comic book, and it establishes that the Emperor of China gave as a gift to the Emperor of Japan this panda, and the Emperor of Japan assigned his gardener to grow bamboo for this panda, but in such a beautiful way that it's also, like a Japanese garden estate, that you want it to flourish and look beautiful, but the gardener is at contention with the panda who's just eating everything. And so just explaining that, I think, gives this kind of silly hijinks that are about to happen, that explain away everything that you would otherwise be like, wait, why am I doing this? So what's happening? It just gives it this poppy, fun, vibrant, almost like Looney Tunes setup vibe, that's reinforced by the artwork. It's reinforced by everything else in the game. And you wouldn't really think that Takenoko, the panda game, needs to have some lore, but without that lore, I think it wouldn't have the structure to thrive in the way that it does. And that's just an abstract panda game, let alone, I'm wearing my Frosthaven shirt right now, like, we often associate lore with, big fantasy races and events and things that happened 10,000 years ago, because everything in fantasy is descended from Papa Tolkien saying, this is how we are going to talk about ancient things that happened in our secondary world fiction. But lore can be the blurb on the back of a box that just helps someone have some sort of understanding for why am I doing what I'm doing beyond it's a game of checkers.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about it when we discussed this last time, but like the blurb there's usually a blurb in the rule book on like the very first page that just gives here's the world we're playing in, here's generally what you're doing. And I think the biggest example we had was Clank, which I'm not going to get back out because we did it last time, and I don't want to do a too many Groundhog Day things here. But I do think that one did a great job of letting you know, hey, you are dungeon delvers. You're going to go into this dungeon. You want to get the biggest treasure. but you want to get out before you get attacked by the dragon. Like, just reading that blurb would tell you, for the most part, what your primary objective is and what your secondary objective is in this game. You need to get into the dungeon. You need to get out before you die. Like, that is...
I think lore, especially in the connotation of one-and-done games, not campaign, thematic, storytelling games, but one-and-done games, when you can describe what's going to happen in the game thematically, and then the mechanics then have that sort of follow-through that it makes sense, that logical reality type of thing, that I think that's where lore can be greatly in service. I remember when I was working on a review for Lords of Waterdeep, which was a few years ago, but it was, meant to kind of be a retrospective on Lords of Waterdeep. And I wrestled with the idea that people thought of it when it released as a very unthematic game, and to demonstrate that I think it's actually a very thematic game. It's just a game type that's more abstract than a lot of other game types out there. I described everything that happens in the game on a thematic basis, and you have a pretty solid understanding of what that game is. You are politician, like we already established, or maybe a business owner or someone who is one of the political movers and shakers in this city, and you are going to hire various heroes, attract them to complete quests that are going to further cement your influence over this city. Eventually, you're going to own different establishments. That'll give you residual income. You're going to compete over certain resources that become available. And your agents who are working on your behalf know that they're going to have to work around the efforts of the other agents who are also in the city. And you might end up having to do some underhanded things to force certain tasks upon your political rivals, or to capitalize on other pillars of interest that you can through the cards that you play, your intrigue cards. And that alone, I think, is, if someone was sitting down with you and was like, okay, what are we doing in this game? You give them that, then everything else just falls together. Well, how do I make that happen?
Yeah.
And it becomes the mechanical underpinning. But as long as they have that one paragraph of text, they can refer to that in their brain as what's driving them to do. The lore is the why, other than winning, of course. You're trying to win.
And I think that is a really good segue into resonant mechanisms, because that, to me, is the why, and the lore helps inform you of like, oh, this is my bigger overarching goal. But it also, I feel like, helps make sense of these resonant mechanisms are things that you're doing that are like, oh, okay, this is meant to represent this in the lore. Oh, right. Okay, so like when I'm playing Sky Team, this is me communicating to air traffic control that I need that plane out of the way.
Right.
And it can help take some of these things that are like a little bit abstract. Like for Sky Team, when you are calling air traffic control and saying, hey, I need that plane taken out of the way. We sometimes think of it as we've shot the planes out of the air. At least John thinks about it that way. John's like, no, we're calling in hits on these planes. But I think for people who are new to the game, I can see why you might think you're shooting these planes out of the air, because you just are calling, you like place your dice somewhere and you pick up the plane and it's no longer there. You've shot that plane down, which is not what's happening. And I think that the resonant mechanism of, oh wait, we're landing our plane this mechanism is us confirming with air traffic control that we are going to be landing.
Right. More important now than ever when there's like 2 air traffic controllers in the entirety of the U.S.
I have to take off from DCA here soon, next week.
Good luck. To take another example of a game where I think it very unsuccessfully does this is Ticket to Ride. You know, Ticket to Ride is a great game. It's a very successful game, but I think the mechanisms are often at odd with what you're attempting to accomplish, or the thematic conceit of the game. There is lore. There's a blurb. You are trying to make it around the United States, hitting as much as you can in like this like race, which is before the end of the game. But none of that really feels like it comes through in the mechanics at all. And if you just brought your logical reality, you know, like I have trains, there are train systems, I'm establishing routes between different places in the United States or whatever Ticket to Ride setting that you have. Yeah. It starts to betray itself because you're like, wait, so is this a route I have ownership of? Or can someone else use this route? Like, I don't really understand what I'm doing. And the mechanisms of, you know, I have to collect a certain number of cards that match the colors on this route. Like, what makes this a blue route versus a pink route versus a green route? None of that plays into a thematic essence in the game at all. And so even though I like Ticket to Ride, I think one of the great failures of that game is that it doesn't do anything interesting on a thematic sense with its story or how you play. The only thematic resonance that you get out of that game is through the components, through the visuals, through the look. Yeah. You just have to be like, well, I like trains, and you play with trains in this. But nothing about that game successfully makes you feel like you own trains, you're riding trains, you're having to contend with something unique about trains. So, like...
Is the story that you're buying, are you buying the routes, or are you building the routes?
You're not doing any of that. The story
that's
is
neither of what you're doing. Oh,
no,
I just play train.
You're the characters on the front. If you look at the front of the box, there are different characters who are like a kid, an old dude. Let me see here. You're these different colors, though even that doesn't really come through. Those are the player colors. And the idea is, the Wikipedia here, gameplay based off of the format, the original setup. Okay, we have setup, play, scoring, standalone versions, accessories, train pieces. We have Ticket to Ride original. I don't think anywhere on the Wikipedia, which is a vast Wikipedia, has anything to do with the theme of what this game is, which I think goes to show that betrayal. But if you look at what the blurb is, Ticket to Ride, I'm going over here, players collect. So again, it's a mechanical 15 minutes, types of train cards. The longer routes, the more points they earn. Continues the tradition, blah, 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 becomes board games. Epitome of a gateway game. Do I have a Ticket to Ride rulebook? I swear this isn't a fever dream that there is a story to Ticket to Ride.
It kind of sounds like it's a fever dream. I'm kind of just looking for the rulebook right now, just on Board Game Geek. I literally have the game.
On a blustery autumn evening, 5 old friends met in the back room of one of the city's oldest and most private clubs. Each had traveled a long distance from all corners of the world to meet on this very specific day, October 2nd, 1900, 28 years to the day that the London eccentric Phileas Fogg accepted and then won a $20,000 bet that he could travel around the world in 80 days. When the story of Fogg's triumph and blah, 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 group commemorated circumnavigating, blah, 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 each succeeding year they met to celebrate the anniversary and pay tribute. And each year, a new expedition, always more difficult with a new wager, was proposed. Now at the dawn of the century, it was time for a new impossible journey. The stakes, 1 million in a winner-takes-all competition. The objective to see which of them could travel by rail to the most cities in North America in just 7 days. The journey would begin immediately. So why can I not drive on your rail? Like, why can I not go on your road here?
Why
it
is a
all
friend
falls
an
apart.
old friend? Why is this child an old friend with these other old people?
I don't know. Point being, this isn't necessarily like to criticize that Ticket to Ride is a failure of a game, but I honestly think by giving it that story, that lore, it sets up a tonal promise that is undermined by the mechanics of the game. And so in talking about mechanical resonance, nothing about what you do even feels metaphorically linked to what the concept of the game is supposed to be. And that betrayal, or, you know, that being at odds with itself prohibits you from feeling thematically immersed at all.
Yeah, I think that you could easily just if this was just re-themed to be like your Rockefeller trying to buy as many train contracts as possible, that would make sense why you have ownership of this route. You bought the contract for this route.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I playing as a child adventuring the world in 7 days? Does he have parents?
Exactly. Is that kid, like, is he
he the son of Phineas Fogg? Who is this?
I'm a mandatory reporter. If this kid is just like cruising around on these tracks, I'm like,
he's going to Duluth. Here? Let him go to Duluth.
Oh, that Duluth is so not where Duluth actually is.
Oh,
Oh man. That's another thing. The moment you sit down with someone who knows some geography and they're playing Ticket to Ride, they're like, "Wait, what's going on here?"
Wait, where is Duluth? Wait, hold on. Now I'm like, I did think Duluth was there.
I think the anniversary edition, which I have, makes a nod to that, though. In the map, it actually has like a sign that's a little tiny sign that says like, "Here is the actual location of Duluth."
Yeah, wait, that's just Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Duluth is just What is this?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
it's all falling apart.
Listen, it already did pretty good. You know what? Ticket Ride did pretty okay, even without being tonal, like having mechanisms that resonate with the theme and lore that it is trying to portray. I think that there's a lot of games that we could point to as good examples of this. I think the Root, I think, does an amazing job of this, where it is the mechanisms do a really good job extrapolating out, and they make sense, like, tonally with you as the Woodland Alliance are like these scrappy upstarts that are trying to start a rebellion.
Right.
The Marquis de Cat are like very rigid because they are a formal power structure, and you only have so many actions that you can do because you are like, you have bureaucracy to contend with.
And then the Erie, which is Rome, which is falling and in constant turmoil because you have these despots who are announcing this is the new decree of how things are happening, but when that decree falls apart, then they're just overturned by yet another leader, and has that ebb and flow. Yeah, Root is a great example of how it tries to paint a picture, but then support it mechanically in a way that's both very interesting mechanically to play. Like the game itself is like, oh, I have my own sort of mini game, but you can see how that's informed and trying to be reflective of what the thematic pitch is for each faction. Game of Thrones does a great job of this with the action tokens that you put out face down, and then everyone reveals, but then the order of resolution is kind of up to you. It I think does a really good job of giving like a fog of war, and then you start seeing what other people's capabilities are and having to take turns in operation, and then having certain elements of the game, certain powers that are contended with apart from the actual board state of the game, that give you decision-making process when it comes to breaking ties or more information, or even added combative benefits that feel very in tune with the lore of Game of Thrones, but they also give you like tangible benefits that even if you were completely divorced of the game, or divorced of the theme from it being an adaptation, I think you still would have this sense of like possessing this sword, is representative of me being, charged with some sort of military power, and I have some decisiveness in battle, but I also call upon additional resources.
Yeah.
And that's a sought-after thing that's going to be an important thing for you to be able to rely on in the future. When you do something in a game and you're like, yes, I want to do this, and it helps me better understand what the game is trying to say as a theme, that's when it's thematically resonant.
Yeah, and I think one mechanism that I want to talk about, because I think it also ties into logical reality, and this is a game that we talked about quite a bit when we recorded this initially, is Dune Imperium. And I think the mechanic that I specifically want to talk about are the intrigue cards, where it is the lore of the game is that these intrigue cards are like either political dirt you have on somebody or like some sort of soft power you have over another faction through the Bene Gesserit. Leverage.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that works really well to help enunciate on the theme in a way where it's like these cards are helping reinforce the theme of the Bene Gesserit are like these leverage, they deal in secrets, is that the intrigue cards can do a lot of different things. And it's very difficult to tell exactly what these intrigue cards people have are.
Right.
And it's like you have no clue if that intrigue card is something that will let your opponent jump up with one of the factions. Or is it just swords? It might just be swords. They might have like an army that you're not aware of. But maybe it's they can trade a certain amount of spice for something else. Or maybe it's an end-of-game bonus. Like the fact that these intrigue cards have so many possibilities means that they keep you second guessing in a way that fills out like the lore of these cards are leverage that you don't know what it is. You're going to get backstabbed by these cards.
So, like in the story and in the game, the same thing is essentially happening. You as the player are looking at someone else who has been working with the Bene Gesserit. You know that they have intrigue cards, so you know that there are things there, and that's causing you to hesitate and have to gamble based off of what you can tell from visible information about what you want to do when it comes to your relationship with that faction. And it could have dire consequences, which could, completely separate from the game, be exactly something that's happening in the story, where you know that you as an Atreides or the House Carino or whatever have to gamble with the fact that this opponent may have more information than you, and they may have resources that you don't have access to, and that unknown is going to be a critical part of the equation in how you interact with that faction. So there's that resonance, that logical reality. You expect that someone who has worked with the Bene Gesserit, if you have any understanding of Dune whatsoever, that they're going to have that sort of political leverage in their back pocket. So that's a great example.
The concept of even within the world of the story, if you have formed a soft alliance or an alliance with the Bene Gesserit, which is maybe a little bit more visible than like in the world of Dune, you would know. Like House Atreides wouldn't necessarily know exactly how much leverage somebody has gained with the Bene Gesserit. But just this person is dealing with the Bene Gesserit. Things are going to go down when those cards get played. Like those cards are going to be influential. At the same time, though, because they could have easily made those just like, I don't think that would have been great, but they could have easily made those things that just give you swords for combat. And they could have easily made those be things that just give you like bumps in different political factions or like a discount on something. The fact that it is like these cards really, truly interact with so many different aspects of the game means that you cannot know what your opponents have based in the cards. And I think that to me is like the really big, it works, one, because of the lore of the game, and two, because of the implementation. And the mechanics resonate really well with the story, and also just logically, it makes sense that within this world, that you don't know what the Bene Gesserit have planned.
So I think in the end, like the things that we wanted to explore with this episode was just that there are a lot of different levers that game creators can pull to convey certain things about a game that make it more thematic. And theme, even though there are going to be some hardcore people out there who are like, I don't care about the theme at all of a game, I think for the most part, theme is going to be the access point in which a game is going to first get into someone's life. They're going to hear about a game and they're going to get the thematic concept and go like, oh, that sounds like something that I want to play. And it's going to be the difference between someone liking a game and someone absolutely loving the game. Clearly, it's how a game is marketed. It's, oftentimes there's emotional connections to them. And these are just different ways that game creators can exude, can express theme. And then the ways that we as players, can pick up on that stuff, can feel it, why we like the things that we like. And sometimes why we reject things, or games that overcome that. We like them in spite of how poorly they do in one or more categories.
Yeah, totally. We posted asking about what is your favorite way a game exudes its theme. We have a couple comments that are just stating their favorite games that are thematic. So from Marius Miliauskas, we have John Company.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Another Whirly Gig.
Whirly Gig, typically, I think, does a really great job with theme. They're a publisher that I think is of note as being good at that. QRLD.6608 said, for me, it's Twilight Struggle and probably Root. We talked about Root. When we discussed this comment last week, I stated that I had not played Twilight Struggle. And you had mentioned
you're not missing much.
You had mentioned that
you're not missing
wasn't
much.
Your favorite game, but that a lot of people do consider this like a very thematic game because of the era it came out.
It to me is one of the quintessential historical games that uses the coin like structure. I don't know, it's not a counterinsurgency game, but the idea of you're playing events that are real world events that are action cards. For my money, if you want a 2-player war game that uses historical lines to kind of represent more political theater and political war as opposed to literal, I'd just go for Votes for Women. I think it's a more modern implementation of the same thing. Twilight Struggle is incredibly influential. It is thematic. I didn't love it. The paper components, I think I mentioned last week as well, the paper map that you unfolded, at least in the version that I played, I remember thinking like, man, this is just like unfolding a map that you'd buy at a gas station or something. Leading the world to terrifying ends in a Cold War struggle is really what it's trying to depict, and I think it does a good job at doing that.
Yeah. From Greg White, we said it needs to come from the rules. Sure, the visuals help, but the rules need to evoke the theme. I think that we're both in agreement on that. I mean, I think that's a lot of what we were talking about with the resonant mechanisms, the logical reality, and honestly, even the tone to me, where it's like the game has to have like a clear vision of what it's trying to tell the players, and so even the visuals help aid that, but the mechanics of the game have to supplement or like create the theme that you're building.
Right.
Blue Sec Pearl listed off 2 specific mechanics that they enjoy that do feel thematic, which is in Nemesis. I love how the noise markers in event deck escalate the plot with more and more things going wrong, and it usually ends up being a minute before an alien pops out. Granted, some early bad dice rolls can make that go sideways, and this is a thing. I am always in disbelief that anybody survived Alien. I understand.
What do you got against Ellen Ripley?
It is nothing against Ellen Ripley. It is just that they make this monster to be so powerful and like able to kill people. So like the monster has like has no urgency of, man, I really got to kill these people. I just think that it makes sense that things would go bad very quickly. Is my thought, but then that is
I think things did go bad. Yeah, things
she made
broke
it up
bad.
fine. She made it fine. She had no trauma. She's fine. In the other specific mechanic that Blue Sec Pearl mentioned is in Spirit Island. I love how as you get stronger, you get slower at reacting to invader threats. You start with 2 lands impacted by invaders, which grows to 3 lands if playing with an adversary, and then 4 lands by the end of the game. The balance is that you have more powers to wipe them off the island. So just like as your spirit grows in power, you do have more things that you have to react to. But also you get powers that allow you to react in more powerful ways.
Yep.
Totally agree. I think that especially with Spirit Island, that is a good thematic representation of the threat never... it feels like it never stops, and you have to have so many more things that there are more teeny tiny fires that you have to react to, so sometimes you get slower at reacting to all of the fires, but you get better and better fire extinguishers, hopefully. And then the last comment is from F. Brocht, who said, "Ugh, this is such a nice question. Thank you. I pride myself on asking good questions. I could chat about this for hours. There's exuding theme in itself, and then there's what I'm tentatively calling thematic cohesion, which is when the theme not only comes in strongly, but also reinforces the mechanics and rules. And I think that's pretty much what we're talking about with tonal consistency. Thematic cohesion and tonal consistency, I think, is one and the same. For example, lots of games use the pick one card, then pass the others to the next player and repeat with the cards the other player passed on to you style of closed drafting. But only Sushi Go has the thematic cohesion of this mechanic that is afforded by being thematically about picking sushi from a conveyor belt restaurant. And I fully agree. I think Sushi Go is a great example of the mechanic of the closed drafting where you're passing the cards works really well with the theme of you can only grab what sushi is currently available to you, and you can only choose one because is going. But things will eventually loop back around to you, hopefully.
God, I just want to eat some sushi right now.
Dude, I could crush some sushi, but not the seafood sushi. I don't like seafood sushi. I don't like seafood.
Oh, okay.
It's a sad thing. It's very sad.
No wonder you moved away from Alaska. Yeah.
I have only lived in places with great seafood, and I don't like seafood. It's so sad. I lived in Florida, Boston, Alaska, Los Angeles. Now I'm in DC, which is like crab. Crab is good here. I just don't like seafood, and it's I could like
crush some. I'd crush some like rice balls with you.
Yeah, you and me, we're gonna eat some jelly donuts. We're gonna have a great time.
Okay, sounds good.
The Pokemon reference. When they were Americanizing one of the episodes of the anime, Brock calls like rice nigiri, or not nigiri, but like a rice ball. He's like, I sure do love these jelly donuts.
Perfect. Brock is a special guy.
He's using his frying pan as a drying pan. I love
there
Pokemon. To continue the comment that I was reading, my favorite example is Root. The entire game of Root is pretty much entirely made of this thematic cohesion. But my favorite example is the martial law rule for the Woodland Alliance. It's a very specific, seemingly arbitrary rule that says the cost and cards to do an action is raised by 1 depending on the board state. It's extremely easy to forget until you explain it thematically. The action you're taking is spreading sympathy for your faction's goals in a non-militaristic manner. The cards you're spending are civilian supporters willing to band together to build that sympathy within the region. And the cost is raised by 1 if there are 3 or more warriors of an enemy faction in that region. 3 is the maximum amount of warriors that can deal hits in a battle, so it's pretty ingrained in any Root player that a region with 3 warriors has good warrior presence. It makes complete sense that you'd need extra support to make a region sympathetic to your faction's goals if there is already a significant military presence from an enemy faction in that region. The theme alone turns what would be an inscrutable and arbitrary number tweaking rule into something that just makes complete and natural sense, contributes to world building, and makes you look at the board through the particular lens of your faction. It's perfect. I mean, I agree. I
can't argue with it.
Yeah. You and I have already talked about Root and how we think that it does a very great job making.
I just played Root this week, and I agree.
Did you win?
I just played it. Yes, I
okay, so
won
you can speak
handily.
Better then. Okay.
Yeah, I'm an authority. I won as the Birds. Played the Airy, and I had an advantage. I was playing against 2 people who had played a learning game once before, and that learning game wasn't with me. They were playing with all new players, so none of them really knew. So it wasn't even like me shepherding it along. They told me go hard, and I was like, I'll go medium. There's a lot to grow. But point being, yes, completely agree. It's very thematic, and that game still rules.
Yeah, I think that it just does such a great job of letting you tell a story using your actions and your mechanics. And right. I think the theme of it for each faction has a set of mechanics that just fits thematically in a way that reaffirms the theme that it is trying to tell. So yeah, we fully agree. Root is definitely a game that we think very highly of, especially in terms of being a thematic game. So thank you everyone for your comments. If you have any thoughts about what we've talked about so far, or if you would like to suggest a theme for our podcast, or if you want to just give us some questions that you have that are not related to any theme that we have going on, feel free to email us at cardboardherald@gmail.com, or comment on this video if the platform you are on allows you to comment. So if you're on YouTube or Spotify, feel free to comment there, and let us know your thoughts about how you think games best exude, ooze, represent theme, radiate theme. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being an awesome community. I have been Eric with the Cardboard Herald, joined by Jack.
Bye.